No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
The revolution will not be televised.
What's up? It is Killer Mike, also known as Michael Render, and I'm encouraging you to listen to more, not less, of Truth Time with Dr. Cornel West and Senator Nina Turner on KBLA Talk 1580.
Shine, flies, no time waits while it's passing you by. Shine, flies, be patient, 'cause good things happen in time. We gon' get it right, we gon' get it right, we gon' get it right. We gon' get it right.
Protests and anthems, yes, we chanting a movement of people. It's like we dancing to the ministry of. It's the energy of, in memory of them that we love. The trinity of the people, the peace, the power, the truth. We speak the powers even louder. We can say it blacker, we can say it prouder. A woman vice president that went to Howard. Now we talk helping black businesses, and our differences is magnificent. Bringing light to the point where the prisons is. I was told good life is where forgiveness lives. The ascension is to leave what's left behind and feed the seeds with deeds that bless the mind, caress the mind, and question justify. With youth and God and time, my best align.
Shine, flies, no time waits while it's passing you by. Shine, flies, be patient, 'cause good things happen in time. We gon' get it right, we gon' get it right. We gon' get it right. We gon' get it right.
How can I be a better father, son, a better grandson, honoring Fannie Lou's and the Fred Hamptons, the Harriets, the chariots that carry us to various areas that marry us to progress. Yeah, we the harvest, the lovely days and midnight marauders, even through charges and days of darkness. No, we in the hands of the greatest artists. I see it in the waters, I see it in our daughters. They could be bridges that know no borders. For so long, them folks try to ignore us. When we at the ballot box, it's a vote for us. Peace to Stacey and the people of Georgia, who galvanized so that we can move forward. Steps are ordered with the presence of mind. Everything's more beautiful in time.
Shine, flies.
You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai Quartey, your host and White House correspondent. I'm in touch, and so you be in touch. Be sure to follow me on all the social media platforms at Dr. Nii-Quartelai. Just type in Dr. Nii-Q. And I pop right on up, fresh for you to follow. Also, be sure to download the KBLA app to listen to us live or on demand, or simply tell Alexa to play KBLA Talk 1580. And there I am. There we are. Fresh for you to follow. Also, be sure to subscribe to A More Perfect Union podcast. That way, you will never, ever, ever miss an episode. We won't let it happen. We hope that you all are having a great day. We have a great show in store for you. Listen, in our second hour, I will be joined by George Fothery for the folks that are in Los Angeles. You are very familiar with the work of George, particularly when it comes to Bruce's Beach. And that's not all he's been up to in recent years. George Fothery, founder of the Black Land Loss Narrative Archive Project. It's a nonprofit initiative dedicated to collecting, preserving, and amplifying the overlooked stories of Black land loss in America. Earlier this week, we talked with Dr. Jocelyn Imani over at the Trust for Public Land about some of the politics afoot related to our public lands. Well, George is addressing that issue in his own way. And so we'll be talking more about that work in the second hour. But this hour, in a little bit, we're going to be talking with Leah Littman. She's a professor of law at the University of Michigan and a former Supreme Court clerk. In addition to co-hosting Strict Scrutiny, she writes frequently about the court for media outlets. We'll be getting her hot take on some of the biggest issues pending before the U.S. Supreme Court. But now it's time for you to decide the good, bad, and ugly headlines of the day. That's right. It's time for our national news roundup. Now, earlier this week, you heard me share insights from my exchange with U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy at the White House, questions around the 1,000 air traffic controllers that were wiped out of consideration because of diversity and inclusion mandates, new mandates at the agency. There's actually litigation that is pending around that issue, but we're continuing to keep our nose on it. But for everybody else that flies frequently or has a flight coming up and maybe you feel a little bit nervous, the FAA they have announced a new air traffic control system in hopes of taming the busy skies. NBC News reporting that the Federal Aviation Administration will embark on an ambitious 3-year plan to modernize America's air traffic control systems and phase out the outdated technologies that are unable to meet modern demands. The federal government has been under pressure to address mounting traveler concerns in the wake of fatal crashes, ongoing delays, and an embarrassing recent revelation that the airspace controllers for the Newark Liberty International Airport in New Jersey, well, they lost all contact with pilots just last week after a failure of the copper wiring that transmits radar data from New York to Philadelphia. Yikes. President Trump said he sympathizes with passengers trapped in airports because of air traffic delays. He also said too much air traffic data and communications run through equipment that's from the 1960s. If you can believe it, doesn't even mesh with the plane. That's what we're dealing with here. Secretary Duffy did acknowledge the administration will need considerable assistance from Capitol Hill, and cue Representatives Sam Graves of Missouri and Rick Larson of Washington, the top Republican and Democrat on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. They appeared with Duffy and they vowed to make a bipartisan effort, saying that they don't want the effort to span generations, right? And so they want to really get something done. Talk is cheap. We'll see if that happens. The stakes certainly could not be higher. Speaking of high stakes, particularly as it relates to the 2024 election, we saw former President Joe Biden and former First Lady Dr. Jill Biden on The View today. Biden denies cognitive decline in office. Now, there are a couple books that are getting a lot of buzz. One is already out by Jonathan Allen and another journalist. They have a book that's out right now, Original Sin, by Jake Tapper of CNN and Alex Thompson of Axios. That's coming out. And so it's hard to not see the Bidens out and about. It's hard to not read this as them preemptively addressing some of the concerns that are likely going to be shared in those books. But NBC News reporting that the former president denied that he suffered cognitive decline while serving in the White House, saying allegations trickling out since he departed his position were off base. He said straight up, they are wrong. That's what he said on the episode of The View today. He was asked about deeply sourced books that indicated the sharp decline in his last year in office. And he says there's nothing to sustain that. Whoopi Goldberg brought up Biden's catastrophic debate that took place in June, though she did not press him on what had happened, instead calling it a bad night. Biden sent Democrats into panic during the debate, as you all remember that performance. I was there to cover that. It was, you could have heard a mouse do their business on cotton. That's how quiet it was in the spin room and in the debate hall during that debate in Atlanta with then candidate Trump. one of the hosts also asked the former First Lady of allegations in the recent book that she cocooned Biden, shielding any infirmities from the public. Some of those details were reported in Fight, a book by Jonathan Allen of NBC News and Amy Parnes over at The Hill. Dr. Biden rejected that she was protecting him and said it was hurtful when others depicted her as some kind of Lady Macbeth. And so if you want to see that full interview, I'm sure you can go on YouTube to watch it. But the Biden's denying any cognitive decline in office. Finally, federal prosecutors have opened a criminal investigation into the New York Attorney General. The Guardian is reporting that federal prosecutors have opened a criminal investigation in New York's Attorney General Letitia James after the Trump administration alleged last month in a referral that she may have falsified paperwork for property she owns in Virginia and New York. The investigation marks a swift and notable escalation against James, a major political enemy of Donald Trump, who was ordered to pay more than $450 million in penalties as a result of a lawsuit brought by James's office that accused him of inflating his net worth to secure financial benefits. In what appears to be the early stages of the FBI criminal investigation, prosecutors have impaneled a federal grand jury to hear evidence in the Eastern District of Virginia after the head of the Federal Housing Agency, William Polk, last month made the referral to the Justice Department. And so, is this, a political prosecution? A lot of folks out there say it is. We're going to see what this grand jury says. But the New York Attorney General has denied these allegations. When we come forward, we're switching gears, looking forward to welcoming to the show somebody who knows a thing about law and order. I'm sure she knows a lot about the show. I'm sure she knows even more about applications of law and order. When we come forward, we'll be joined by Leah Littman. You're listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580.
You're listening to A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about. If you missed our KBLA Talk 1580 Town Hall, the Altadena Eden Fire, 100 Days and Counting, you missed an evening of reverence, reflection, and reality.
You got to live in the reality because this is it. Every day. You wake up, is this my life? Don't stay in denial because yes, it is. Don't stay in bargaining where you're praying for a miracle. And if it wouldn't have happened, then this is what I would have done. It did.
Our panel participants kept it real. Really real.
I think, number one, it's amazing to me how we ignore systemic racism in our community. And as a people, we've apologized for so much. But when will we stop apologizing for what we have paid for? Because the truth of the matter is we paid for this.
You can always count on KBLA Talk 1580 to give it to you straight, no chaser. When you love folk, you tell them the truth. Seeking the truth, speaking the truth. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we don't black down.
Is reviewing life insurance on your to-do list? Now's the perfect time to add it. A friend recently told me that securing life insurance sooner rather than later can help you lock in lower rates for years to come. So I bumped this up on my list and got it done. I called SelectQuote and couldn't believe how easy and affordable life insurance is. I'm 40 and got a $500,000 policy for $16 a month. My husband's also 40 and his $500,000 policy was only $18 a month. Plus, with SelectQuote's same-day coverage, there was no medical exam required, and we were covered by the time we hung up. Knowing I have this checked off my list feels amazing, but the peace of mind knowing my family is protected feels even better.
Call SelectQuote at 1-800-729-7070. That's 1-800-729-7070. Or go to SelectQuote.com to get your free quote today. That's 1-800-729-7070. Details on example rate at SelectQuote.com.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 is committed to self-care and community well-being. Walk Good LA was formed in June 2020, inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement and the beginning stages of the COVID-19 pandemic. What began as a few minutes of breath work and yoga meditation before protests against police brutality turned into a safe space for the community to heal in hard times. The immensely positive response from the community transformed the momentum into a movement. Today, Walk Good LA is a Black and Brown-led community wellness organization based in Los Angeles. They provide spaces for healing through community yoga classes, guided meditations, hikes, run clubs, and other activations throughout Los Angeles that attract hundreds of members weekly. With the help of Propel and Michael B. Jordan, they now have a yoga and wellness studio in Los Angeles called the Walk Good Yard. To join their mailing list and connect with healing spaces, please visit walkgoodla.org. That's walkgoodla.org. Or find them on Instagram at walkgoodla. This is a community call to action, a community call to healing from KBLA Talk 1580.
All I need is one mic.
With a KBLA Talk 1580 editorial, I'm Tavis Smiley. With so many shows on our station weekdays and weekends, it's hard for me to keep track of all the guests who are actually in studio on any given day. I wish I'd known in advance that LADA Nathan Hochman was coming in studio for a recent interview. Had I known, I would have loved to have personally greeted him and then asked him why LA City Council member Curran Price is being criminally prosecuted for allegations of misconduct similar to the conflict of interest violations for which former City Council member Kevin De Leon is only being fined. What's that about, Mr. DA? In fairness to Mr. Hochman, it was former DA George Gascon who actually filed felony charges against Councilman Price. I opined then on how these criminal charges against Price did not pass the smell test. I was concerned then that this was yet another wayward prosecution of a high-profile black elected, not to mention a waste of taxpayer money. I am even more convinced now that this is a hot mess. To be clear, neither you or I want a bunch of self-serving, greedy, conflict of interest criminals managing the people's business inside LA City Hall. But we also don't want selective or targeted prosecution of black politicians. We've seen that movie before, and we don't need a sequel. It's hard to watch Kevin De Leon get away with paying an $18,000 fine for repeated ethics violations, what he calls an oversight, and at the same time, watch the DA's office continue its criminal prosecution of Curran Price for issues allegedly involving his wife's clients. Motions, I might add, that were passed unanimously by the LA City Councilman. What are you saying, Tavis? I'm glad you asked. DA Hochman did not start this inquisition, but he certainly has the power to stop it. I have said it before, and I will say it again. Fundamental fairness. In the absence of fundamental fairness, we experience a cascade of deteriorating conditions. The erosion of trust, the weakening of social cohesion, alienation, marginalization, the legitimacy of authority diminishes, cynicism and disengagement grow, and ultimately, people abandon civic participation altogether. Fundamental fairness, Mr. Hochman, that's all we ask. With a KBLA Talk 1580 editorial, I'm Tavis Smiley. As always, we welcome your feedback.
National News The Consequence. Informed opinion. And analysis beyond the headlines. You're listening to A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580.
You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai Quartey, and really delighted to welcome Leah Littman. She's a professor of law at the University of Michigan. And get this, a former Supreme Court clerk. In addition to co-hosting Strict Scrutiny, she also writes frequently about the court for media outlets like The Washington Post and The Atlantic. You might have heard her on NPR or seen her on MSNBC. She's received the Ruth Bader Ginsburg Award for her scholarly excellence from the American Constitution Society and published in top law reviews. We are talking to the right one today. Welcome to the show, Leah.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being here. You got a book coming out that dives a little bit deeper into what is looking more and more and more like a kooky Supreme Court.
That's what I'd call it. So the book is called Lawless: How the Supreme Court Runs on Conservative Grievance, Fringe Theories, and Bad Vibes. The subtitle definitely gives you a sense of what the book is about.
Yeah. I mean, and in the book, I mean, part of what you assert is that there is something deeply rotten about the Supreme Court, right? And, based on your body of work, you're not saying that something is rotten just because, you may have an unconventional, president that seems to be really successful in influencing this court inside and outside of office. But you're saying it's deeper than that. Let's dive into just sort of your central thesis around the book.
Yes. So the basic thesis is the Supreme Court has started to run on vibes rather than law. And by vibes, I mean more like feelings or the general zeitgeist of the political party that the majority of justices were appointed by. Now, you're right that I don't think this is just a story about Donald Trump or Donald Trump's appointees. And all of the 5 chapters go through different areas of law, and they use different main cases as case studies. And several of the main cases predate any of Donald Trump's appointments to the Supreme Court. So the middle chapter, for example, focuses on Shelby County versus Holder, the 2013 Supreme Court decision that dismantled a key part of the Voting Rights Act. And one of the big vibes that I say the Supreme Court is running on is this idea of conservative grievance, where they feel like there's no discrimination except for discrimination against white evangelical Christians and other individuals who are part of the core Republican base and constituency. And that idea is really driving a lot of their decisions today.
I mean, it really is, sort of a do as I say, not as I do principle that is the holy grail right now for conservatives. I mean, for example, when we talk about arguments for religious liberty, they are alleging, that, anti-Christian bias is out of control, right? Anti-Semitism is out of control, right? But the way in which they define what is anti-Christian and what is anti-Semitic is very narrow, no?
It's very particular. So, one of the more striking things about what I think the court is doing is they're really inverting the concepts of equality and discrimination. So, they are defining anti-Christian, anti-religious discrimination to basically mean equality for LGBT individuals. So they have carved out various exceptions to civil rights statutes that prohibit discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity, and insisted that those laws are actually targeted rank discrimination against the religious and social conservatives who object to LGBT equality.
So Leah, I've got to ask you, as somebody who has clerked at the U.S. Supreme Court and somebody who writes so much about it, you're an expert on the institution. What is keeping you up late at night these days that our leaders, learners, and listeners, would be wise to be dialed in about, because, it could very well impact our daily lives, making a material difference on our daily lives? What's keeping you up late at night that reaches that standard?
Yeah, so where to start? One thing is, I'm a little concerned that we are currently in a moment where a lot of people are looking to the Supreme Court to save us from Donald Trump and Trumpism. And even though I am not an optimist about this Supreme Court, I fully expect that they will indeed rule against the Trump administration on several important cases. And one of the things that concerns me is that people will focus only on those decisions and take that to mean that all is well at the Supreme Court, and we will lose steam from the movement that recognized there actually is a real problem with the Supreme Court as it exists today. So part of me is concerned about people overly narrowly focusing on a few decisions that will go against the Trump administration to the exclusion of a host of other important cases where I expect the court will advance the Trumpist ideology. Just to give one example of a case that falls into that category. The Supreme Court recently heard a case about whether states must create religious public charter schools. You heard that right. Whether states must create religious public charter schools. And I expect that they will say states have to do that. That is going to be demolishing the separation of church and state and basically reading the Establishment Clause out of the Constitution. And I worry that that's going to get lost in the coverage of the Supreme Court and the Trump administration cases.
Wow. Who would have ever thought that in our lifetime we would see, the separation from church and state blur, if not disappear altogether?
It's really astonishing. And this has been something that the Republican appointees have been trying to chip away at for the better part of 5 years. So they basically started with a case that said states have to provide funding for religious schools, at least for playground pavement and resurfacing. And that seemed harmless enough because it wasn't about religious instruction. But then they gradually expanded that to require more and more state support for religious schools. And now they are in a position to say, actually, states must have to create religious public charter schools. It was astonishing during the oral argument when Justice Brett Kavanaugh said, look, state, you are saying if these secular schools come to you, then you will grant them a public charter school. But when religious schools come to you, you won't. How is that not rank discrimination? And I just think you are just describing the separation of church and state, right? That cannot be rank discrimination. You are declaring the Constitution itself unconstitutional.
And it seems to me also, part of what's at stake here, it's not just the separation between church and state, but it's trust of our institutions. A number of these justices in recent years sat before the Senate Judiciary Committee and talked about their respect for precedent and made it appear as if, they wouldn't dare overturn Roe v. Wade. They wouldn't dare violate the separation between church and state. They wouldn't dare go after, the Voting Rights Act. And we've seen these same justices do exactly the opposite. How are you feeling in terms of trust for the institution? Is it going to continue to get worse before it gets better?
So I think trust in the institution is about where it should be, which is pretty darn low. And in some ways, I'm actually concerned it will increase as the court rules against the Trump administration.
When we come forward, we're going to dig even deeper into insights from this book that's coming out. It's called Lawless. You all have to check it out. We also want to get Leah's hot take on what President Biden got wrong. Remember when Democrats were talking about reforms of the Supreme Court? Well, some Democrats, there was a commission that was set up. They delivered recommendations. But did President Biden act on them fast enough? Did he act on them at all? We're going to get Leah's take on that and more when we come forward. You're listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580.
The audience is listening. Thought-provoking, eye-opening, heart-rendering. This is where authentic voices meet powerful discussions on culture, community, and change. This is where Black voices matter. He's breaking boundaries, amplifying diverse perspectives, and tackling the issues that matter most to you. You're inside A More Perfect Union with Dr. Nii-Quartelai Quartey on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Bree Wood with BIN News Now. Tensions flared outside of a Grand Rapids, Michigan courthouse as protesters clashed during jury deliberations in the trial of ex-officer Christopher Shore, charged with killing a Black man, Patrick Luoya.
I think that they are really weighing the options and the facts, and I really, truly hope that they come up with something soon.
The jury is deadlocked, but was told to keep trying. One person was arrested. Jurors are in deliberations today in the Tyre Nichols murder trial. 3 former Memphis officers are charged with beating him to death back in 2023. That was caught on video. None of the former officers testified. And a Lending Tree survey shows 77% of parents say raising kids is more expensive than expected, with nearly half having fewer children due to costs. The average cost to raise a child now is nearly $300,000, up 36% in 2 years. A $5,000 baby bonus is reportedly under consideration. Get BIN News Now on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
slowing on the 5, getting out of Burbank. That southbound side loads up at Alameda, delays all the way to the 605. And northbound slowing out of Norwalk from Imperial Highway, heading back towards Lakewood Boulevard. More slowing ahead in Boyle Heights from the 60 and stretches all the way to the 14. Tough on the 405. This is southbound out of West LA. Delays from Sunset Boulevard and stretches all the way to the 605. And it's very slow rolling on the 15 right now out of Norco from 2nd Street all the way to the 210 freeway.
Got issues with youth or high school sports? Positive Coaching Alliance can help. PCA, a national nonprofit, offers more than 1,000 free online resources for youth and high school sports coaches, parents, students, and administrators. Visit PCADevZone.org.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Organizers of the LA Summer Olympics in 2028 made it official Thursday morning. The LA Coliseum will host the opening and closing ceremonies for the Summer Games, scheduled for July 14th to the 30th. This is the third time the Coliseum is hosting the Summer Olympics. The Coliseum hosted the ceremonies and track and field events in 1932 and 1984. SoFi Stadium in Inglewood was an option, but logistics would have made it difficult to host the opening and closing ceremonies. SoFi is hosting the highly popular swimming competitions. A temporary pool and other swimming facilities will be constructed inside SoFi. The city of Inglewood will be busy during the Olympics. The Intuit Dome is hosting the basketball events. The Rams are taking their minicamp to Hawaii. The Rams have scheduled their minicamp for June 16th to the 18th on the island of Maui. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
The revolution will not be televised.
What's up? It is Killer Mike, also known as Michael Render, and I'm encouraging you to listen to more, not less, of Truth Time with Dr. Cornel West and Senator Nii-Quartelai on KBLA Talk 1580.
Attorney advertising. Prior results do not guarantee future outcomes.
Founded in Los Angeles in 1986, litigation powerhouse Quinn Emanuel has deep roots in the Los Angeles community. Since 2007, we have litigated some of the largest fires on the West Coast. We are proud to be the only AmLaw 100 firm in the country to represent wildfire victims, giving affected individuals, families, and businesses the same focus and individualized attention we devote to our Fortune 500 clients. BTI Consulting has repeatedly recognized Quinn Emanuel as among the 4 law firms in-house counsel least liked to oppose in any litigation, and we are often deemed the most feared. And after securing over $80 billion for our clients in various matters firm-wide, we understand why. If you have been affected by the recent wildfires in Altadena and the Palisades and would like to discuss your situation further, please contact wildfire support at QuinnEmanuel.com or call us at 213-443-3050. Quinn Emanuel is proud to sponsor Conversation Live Altadena Rising with James Farr on KBLA Talk 1580.
Attorney advertising. Prior results do not guarantee future outcomes.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminds you that we keep us safe. The Live Your Life organization mentors young women, helping them break negative mindsets and see beyond their surroundings. Through career exposure and hands-on training, they're encouraged to think big, stay focused, and make positive choices. Founded by Nikisha Mama Boo Smith, who transformed her life to become a community leader. Live Your Life is changing lives, but they need your help. They're raising funds to keep their new building open and expand their program. Your donations will support food, clothes, hygiene products, and holiday giveaways. Visit liveyourlife32.com. That's LIVEYOLIFE32.com to help today. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. Now back to building a more perfect union on KBLA Talk 1580.
You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai Quartey, and really delighted to be in conversation with Leah Lippman. She is author of Lawless, which is coming out on May 13th. And so mark your calendars, set your alerts. May 13th, her book Lawless is coming out, and it's all about how the Supreme Court is influenced by these fringe theories and bad vibes and conservative grievances. If you really want to dig a little bit deeper beyond some of the headlines that we've been hearing in recent years about the U.S. Supreme Court, this is the book that you want to add to your collection. We are delighted to have you on. As somebody who was a Supreme Court clerk and who follows this stuff very closely, one thing people may not know about you, though, Leah, is that you're also a reality TV fan.
Huge reality TV fan.
And I read somewhere that you compare the U.S. Supreme Court to the Real Housewives. Is that right?
So this particular book does not use Real Housewives analogies, but on our podcast, we do like to joke that the Supreme Court is in its "Who Gonna Check Me Boo" era of Sheree Whitfield fame. So yes, we do occasionally liken the Supreme Court and particular justices to Real Housewives. You know, the book Lawless, each of the chapters is organized around a different pop culture motif. So no Real Housewives, but there is a little Mean Girls and Barbie in there just for fun.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. I'm just trying to figure out who on the Supreme Court is most like Nene Leakes. I don't know. Leah says, I'm not answering that one.
I am not.
I hear you. I hear you on that. But speaking of, drama, there's been a lot of drama among Democrats around potential reforms to the U.S. Supreme Court. For folks who are less familiar, last July 2024, President Biden announced a bold plan to reform the Supreme Court and ensure that no president is above the law. The framework for that proposal included no immunity for crimes a former president committed in office, term limits for Supreme Court justices, and a binding code of conduct for the Supreme Court. For people who are less familiar, the federal judges have a code of conduct, but that does not extend to Supreme Court justices. Is that correct, Leah?
Yes, that's exactly right.
And so, I have my own ideas, but Leah, tell us from your vantage point, where did these potential reforms to the Supreme Court, when did this idea go wrong? When did it go astray?
So I loved the energy that Joe Biden put forward in July 2024. I'm just kind of wondering where it was in January of 2021, because by that point, it was already clear that the Supreme Court was careening toward the edge. And it was additionally clear after the Supreme Court overruled Roe versus Wade and Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization in summer of 2022. So to my mind, President Biden went wrong in holding out for too long to this false image of the Supreme Court. He had previously served on the Senate Judiciary Committee and has been a long defender of the Supreme Court. And I don't think he realized what the Supreme Court had become until too late, because again, it was only in the final summer of his presidency, in the lead up to the election, that he engaged any of these Supreme Court reforms that his base had been begging him to do. And he took the steam out of that movement by appointing the Supreme Court Commission, but not actually empowering them to do anything besides write a book report. He didn't even allow them to make recommendations for particular Supreme Court reforms.
So Leah, tell us, what can anyone who is just pro-democracy, what can they learn from this? Because, I'm bringing this up, not to, point out a misstep, a colossal misstep in my view, by the Biden administration, but I'm pointing it out so that we might learn from it.
Yes.
Right? Because it seems to me that the way that reforms to the U.S. Supreme Court were handled by the Biden administration were very similar to how other issues were handled. And it was almost as if they weren't met with the seriousness until we were in another election cycle, in which case, the clock is sort of frozen, right? It was dead on arrival, according to Speaker Johnson, when he proposed this package. And so what can Democrats and pro-democracy Americans learn from this mishap?
So I think there are some things Democrats and pro-democracy Americans should take away. I would hope Democrats look at this and realize they need to exercise their political power when they have it. They cannot wait until it's too late. You are elected to office to actually use the political power you have to make people's lives better and to reinforce our democracy. And they did not appreciate the danger our democracy was in when they held office and when they had the power to do something about it. So that's one thing. And then for pro-democracy Americans, I guess I would say two things. One is to think about the importance of selecting leaders who are willing to use their political power when they have it, and who also understand the threats we are up against and the nature of our institutions and their problems. And then second is the importance of laying the groundwork now for reforms later on. I'm under no illusions that if the Democrats came back into power tomorrow, that they would embrace meaningful court reform. But I think if we pro-democracy Americans or the Democratic base convince enough people and organize around the importance of democratizing the Supreme Court, that we will be creating the conditions to actually get some Supreme Court reforms later in the road.
Leah, I think you're the perfect person to ask this next question in our final minutes together. There are a lot of really great lawyers that are a part of legal defense efforts across the country on a whole host of issues. And one of the things I remember back when I worked in public affairs, whenever I would work with, folks from our Office of General Counsel, that it took them a while to sort of catch up to what we were trying to achieve in terms of any innovation or, any sort of strategic partnerships. And I think a lot of people don't understand that general counsels within organizations, they're typically more conservative in their approach. And so what message would you offer to general counsels and the community of general counsels out there in order to really meet this moment, knowing that the courts, may not be, as strong in defending our democracy as most people think?
One is that we have power when we stand together, and we aren't going to get out of this without collective action or solidarity. I think the business community, as well as legal organizations more broadly, have considerable power just in numbers and is huge participants in our civic system. So the better they can organize and get on the same page and stand ready to respond in the event that the president comes after them, the better. The second is just to reinforce and reaffirm the obligations that we have as lawyers to the rule of law. Lawyers are not just some ordinary profession that gets to make whatever decision is in the best economic interest. We have an obligation to actually abide by and uphold the rule of law. And I think that is essential to constitutional democracy, and we need to keep that higher obligation in mind.
Our thanks to Leah Lippman, a professor of law at the University of Michigan and a former Supreme Court clerk. You're so clear. You're just so clear and easy to talk to about these things.
Thank you.
You're a great educator, and our community of leaders, learners, and listeners, we really thank you. Everybody, be sure to go out and pick up Leah's new book. It's called Lawless. It's being released by Simon & Schuster on May 13th. We really appreciate having you, and you're welcome to come back anytime.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580, the quiet part out loud when we come forward.
Striving to make America a nation as good as its promise. This is A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
I feel so alone. I'm embarrassed to talk about it.
How can I help my kid if I can't help myself?
I can't remember when I wasn't stressed.
I don't like this.
When you feel overwhelmed by your thoughts and emotions, it's okay to get help. You are not alone. CalHope is here for you with free, safe, and confidential mental health resources for youth, young adults, families, and you. Find support now at calhope.org.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Imagine a Los Angeles where everyone can thrive, where communities have access to the resources they need to succeed. That's the vision of Detours Mentoring Group, Inc. They're dedicated to improving life in LA County by providing educational support, employment assistance, and spaces for community engagement. By 2050, they want LA to be the best place to connect, create, learn, live, and play. They're working toward an education system that's well-resourced and culturally responsive, becoming a hub for artists and innovators, and making sure everyone has access to healthy food, quality healthcare, and safe housing. It's about building a future where we all have the chance to succeed. We invite you to learn more about their mission and get involved with Detours Mentoring Group, Inc. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
The Comedy Connection series featuring KBLA's Zoe Williams, the voice of reason, and the alpha male of comedy, Ray Grady. We're going to transform relationship disasters into stand-up material live at Inglewood's Miracle Theater on May 31st at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. My clinical team will disclose all of your dating woes, while the alpha male of comedy, Ray Grady, has hand-selected supremely talented comedians to roast all of our tragic relationship choices. I dare you to bring your ex's phone number, because Ray, he's going to text it live, and the crowd will be sourcing emojis. Tickets are moving swiftly, so don't hesitate to grab yours at themiracleinglewood.com before I diagnose your dating history as a pre-existing condition.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We face tragedy, but we don't fall into despair. We continue our work to build a more perfect union.
You're listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai Quartey, and it is time for the quiet part out loud. Now, listen, I know that there are a number of folks across the country who have experienced tremendous tragedy. At the moment, I'm thinking of our brothers and sisters and siblings, our fellow Americans in communities like Altadena and the Palisades. I'm thinking of folks in places like Flint, Michigan and Jackson, Mississippi. I'm thinking of folks in places like Asheville, North Carolina. I'm thinking of, folks who have had to face natural disasters, who in many cases have lost everything at no fault of their own. No fault of their own. And when that happens, I think one of the enduring qualities of of our American experiment is that we show up for folks in need, folks in their time of need. And there's something really special about that. And that very tradition, that commitment, is now being called into question. The New York Times is reporting that the leader of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the folks that show up in the aftermath of disasters. The leader of FEMA is dismissed as the Trump administration takes aim at the agency. Cameron Hamilton, you see, he's the acting head of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And guess what? You know what happened today? He was pushed out of his job today. According to several people that are familiar with the departure, his ouster came a day after he told members of Congress that FEMA, which President Trump has suggested should be disbanded, Cameron Hamilton said that it was vital to communities in their greatest times of need and should not be eliminated. It was a profile in courage, all things considered. You see, the agency which coordinates the federal response to natural disasters, they confirmed in a statement that Mr. Hamilton was no longer serving as the acting administrator. Whole bunch of other senior leaders have been fired or decided to leave as the agency has faced an uncertain future. On Tuesday, so today's Thursday, on Tuesday, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, whose agency includes FEMA, she testified before lawmakers that FEMA should be eliminated. That's right. The sitting U.S. Homeland Security Secretary said that FEMA should be eliminated. Mr. Hamilton, appearing before Congress on Wednesday, this is the day after Kristi Noem had testified, he appeared before Congress on Wednesday and said instead that FEMA, quote, must return to its roots, helping state and local governments respond to disasters. The acting FEMA director said something the day after that was at odds with his boss, the Homeland Security Secretary. He said communities look to FEMA in their greatest time of need, and it's imperative that we remain ready to respond to those challenges. Mr. Hamilton added that I do not believe it's in the best interest of the American people to eliminate the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Even so, he said that that was a conversation that should be had between the President of the United States and this governing body. So he was clear, like, look, this is a higher level conversation, but he testified as to what he believed. This debate over whether FEMA should survive, it's nothing new. It dates back to the early days of the administration. You might remember when President Trump visited North Carolina in January, after parts of the state had been devastated by Hurricane Helene, and he said that FEMA under President Biden had failed to do enough to help hurricane survivors. That's what he said. He also said, I think we're going to recommend that FEMA go away. So which one is it? If he's saying that his predecessor, that FEMA under his predecessor had failed to do enough, then wouldn't you as his successor want to do more? No. The president said, quotes, I think we're going to recommend that FEMA go away. President Trump's frustration with FEMA echoed longstanding concerns among the agency's own leaders who felt that it was increasingly being asked to do too much with too few resources. So, for example, FEMA had been asked to work on the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as assisting with migrants in the first Trump administration. Now, call me crazy, but last I checked, they're called the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And so if it aligns with the federal government, if it aligns with managing the federal response to emergencies, then aren't they doing what they should be doing? They have no control over the frequency and the severity of hurricanes, for example. The people at FEMA have no control over the number of wildfires and other calamities that have increased as human-caused climate change causes average temperatures to rise. They ain't got nothing to do with that. There was just $3 billion. There was just $3 billion in disasters in the United States in 1980. This was right before I was born, 1980. $3 billion in disasters. But that total increased to 27 last year, according to some data collected by NOAA. Make no mistake about it, President Trump was the first president to push for the agency's dismantling. And it's generating a lot of alarm with FEMA and also among the state emergency management officials who rely on it. But the administration's desire to actually disband the agency has been unclear. I can't imagine how it feels to hear this news if you are recovering from any of the disasters that I mentioned and too many other disasters to mention. For folks who just lost it all in the LA wildfire, to hear that your new president is playing politics with a lifeline that you and your family are depending on. And for those of us that have not had to face such a tragedy, the idea that this agency would not be equipped to help us in our time of need, there's nothing about that makes America great. There's a lot about that makes America cruel. There's a lot about that just ain't right. And so for folks who have been protecting your peace, protect your peace, but keep a line of sight to this kind of nonsense. Because if you don't pay attention, if you don't engage, it's just a matter of time until you find that FEMA won't be there for you. You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. In our next hour, I'll be joined by George Fothery. We're going to be talking about a new project he's working on, plus all things about the Pope. Yep, we have an American Pope for the first time in history. We're going to be talking about that and more when we come forward. You're listening to A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Bree Wood with BIN News Now. President Trump is calling the Obama Presidential Center a disaster, blaming cost overruns on hiring woke workers.
And he said something to the effect, I only want DEI, he wants woke people to build it. Well, he got woke people, and they have massive cost overruns.